Welcome to the From Concealment Podcast, the show for firearm enthusiasts who like to shoot, train, carry, and compete. Get ready for some shooting insight, firearm and accessory reviews, and of course, insight on concealed carry. And now, broadcasting from behind enemy lines in the From Concealment studio, it's Pete Mitchell and Dan Sams.
Hey, Freedom Nation, this is Pete Mitchell.
And I am Dan Sams.
And you have tuned in for what is promising to be another exciting episode of the From Concealment Podcast.
It is. They're always exciting, and this is going to be another good one.
I was just showing Dan Sams before we started that I'm actually wearing, and for those of you who are tuning into Facebook Live, my Reagan Bush 84 t-shirt, which is not because I am a Reagan Bush fan. After all, Reagan is the one who took away our automatic weapons. He basically is the one who created this weird little market where if you have an automatic weapon, it's worth about $25,000 today.
Yep.
And you drill that third hole, you go to jail. I mean, this is all thanks to Reagan. So
yeah,
not necessarily one of my my hero presidents, though I know most people liked Reagan. But that will always be a sore spot for me. Yeah. It's because I live around a whole lot of snowflakes, and this is going to set them off. That's the
wonderful
reason I wear this t-shirt.
Yeah. Well, and also, you know what? It makes me think of nostalgia and the 80s. And there were some economic things I was thankful for Reagan. But, yeah, it's still troubling that some of the worst anti-gun stuff got pushed through.
Always happens during Republicans. Always.
Yeah.
I mean, Clinton did the whole assault weapon ban, but at least the Republicans put a 10-year moratorium on that, and that ended it.
And now we're enjoying that. And crime rate went down when the thing was over. Wonderful thing. Gun-related crime.
Which, talking about crime rate, man, I know this isn't even really the topic that we were going to dive into, but what do you think about them closing down the police department?
Yeah, in Minneapolis.
Minneapolis, right?
They're defunding and others where they're lowering, like they're cutting some funding. But man, we're in a weird world, man. Think about what was it, 12 days ago? Maybe it's been 2 weeks. I don't even know if it's been 2 weeks when the George Floyd situation happened and they killed him. And now, less than 2 weeks later, they're abolishing their police department. That's a fast way that changed things.
One of the city council members, or whatever it's called there, that voted to close their police department was on CNN. And I don't know if you saw this interview, but she got asked the question by the reporter, what happens if someone's breaking into your home?
Yeah.
To which she replied, yeah, we really got to realize that's a white privilege thing. It's privilege that you get to call 911, whereas someone else calls 911. It's actually more dangerous when the police show up. And which I kind of understand that argument.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, I do understand the argument. I just can't believe they would say that.
Dude, I'm looking at that going, okay, first of all, you think gun sales have been high the last few months. They are going to skyrocket. Because now they've basically said, we are going to do nothing to protect you at all. You better protect yourself.
Yeah. Which, by the way, this was mostly already true. I mean, I'm thinking of 3 different situations where I called the police, or the police were called in a situation. And in none of the situations did they show up fast enough to make a difference. I remember one time where a friend of mine who lives maybe 10 minutes away from me got robbed during the day. His wife gets home, sees that the house has been broken into. She calls 911, and then calls her husband, who calls me and our buddy to say, can you guys just get over there? Because I don't know if there's somebody still there. My wife's waiting can you just make sure my wife is safe? So me and my buddy, I'm ashamed to say I wasn't carrying at the time. This is before I had a permit and I might have had a permit. I wasn't carrying regularly at the time.
What? You didn't have the Constitution? What?
Right.
What?
Don't, I'm ashamed. Anyway, we drove to my house to get guns and then drove over to his house, right? So I don't know, that might have taken us 15 minutes. When we get there, The cops still aren't there. I think we waited maybe another 15 minutes, maybe even another half hour before they showed up. Now, if somebody had been there to cause harm beyond stealing stuff, now they probably ran out when she opened the door, but like, we're talking about at the minimum, it was 20 minutes she was waiting. It was probably closer to 45. And so I'm like, so yeah, that was worthless. And then they show up and they're like, yep, stuff was stolen. Oh, well. I know of another situation where there was an abuse situation. A family member of mine was being threatened, and we couldn't even get the police to call back. Right. Wow. I know of another situation where they thought there was an active shooter. Now, it was a mistake. By God's grace, it wasn't an actual active shooter. Thought it was an active shooter. And to their credit, takes them 6 minutes to get there and respond in gear. And so I'm like, hey, that was really fast. Do you know how many rounds could go off in 6 minutes? Right? Like, so I'm like, I would have been far better off if that had been an active shooter, if we just had somebody on site ready to respond, because 6 minutes, and I think they were really fast. My hat is off to them. Still not good enough. And so I'm in this situation where I'm like, I'm not sure we need them. I mean, there's things that they're valuable for, but not usually for the things that everybody says we need them for. I'd much rather have some type of a security system, security people that we're paying out of, and then that they answer to us as a result. Anyway, yeah.
It was pretty interesting this last week. So on my Facebook page, oh, I know what it was. It was actually the article that I tagged you in. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know, someone was open carrying in California to protect their Van Nuys store.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so this guy who I know, he's a pastor and a church planter. And to be honest, he does really great work there. I mean, literally does really good work. So I don't want to say his name because I don't want to bag on the guy, because that's not my point in bringing this up. So he chimes in on this post and is like, that guy's a fool. He's really going to take a life over someone stealing stuff, which you and I talk about all the time. Let them steal the stuff. I'm not going to kill someone over them stealing stuff.
Yeah.
And so it just got into this whole, would you really protect your stuff? And I'm like, well, if that's how I feed my family, I kind of have a duty to my family. And I'm not saying that I would even shoot someone. You and I know, and we've read over and over again, how literally having the gun in plain view is stopping violence. It's stopping guys from stealing, from looting, because it's like, I don't really want to take the chance that this guy's going to shoot me. I mean, he's got a big old shotgun right there, or an AR or a rifle. I don't know that I want to do it. I think the rooftop Koreans, I think part of the reason why there's no problem there is because they see the rooftop Koreans with all the guns.
Yeah. And they're like, we don't want to mess with these guys.
I'm not going to do it. And I saw one with the bandana. They put a bandana back on. It was awesome. I was like, yes.
I like the meme that says they're returning to their nature is healing itself. The roof Koreans are back.
Yes.
And that we are the virus. That's so good. Or have you seen the one that it's a picture of like the Korean K-pop group, whatever, where there's like 40 of these, like they're like NSYNC or Backstreet Boys, but they're from Korea.
Right.
And then it says like reject modernity, embrace tradition. And it's the roof Koreans.
That's awesome.
I love it, man. So awesome.
Yeah. So anyway, so he starts going off, and then my other buddy chimes in, and he starts ripping on him, like, so yeah, okay. Well, what was funnier to me is I'm like, okay, these two guys don't know each other at all. So they don't know each other's position. I'm like, okay, so my buddy who chimes in is like, you're an idiot, start being a man is basically what he told him. I think he even said that at one point. It was like, be a man. And so, of course, the pastor starts, chiming in and, would you stand before Jesus and this, that, and the next? And Jesus basically told us to be a pacifist. And he goes, and he quotes, Jesus, who said, I didn't come to abolish the law, but to fulfill the law. And he goes, that's my response to that. So we can go back to the Old Testament. He's like, well, you have a problem with the actual words of Jesus. And he goes, the entire Bible is the actual words of Jesus.
Exactly.
So you can't just cherry pick here. And it was funny. And so then he goes, the pastor goes, well, we don't really know each other. So, you seem to, be really bent on, wanting to I can't remember exactly how he said it, but basically you want to be able to be violent or something like that. So I thought I would just go in there and just introduce them to each other. I go to the pastor. I go, well, let me tell you about my buddy over here. He's one of the most educated Christian men I've ever known. He had a huge impact on me when we both went to Biola, which is a very well-known evangelical Christian college, probably the most well-known evangelical Christian college outside of Liberty University, which now has the primary reputation for a whole nother reason completely.
Yeah.
And I go, his dad, in fact, has been on the Church Planner podcast, which I know Robert knows about and listens to. I'm like, that's just to give you a little pedigree. Oh, and he's a Navy SEAL. So he's not just, a guy who's like, let me just talk theology. He's like, look, I know theology and I also know combat because he's a Navy SEAL. And then so it was funny. So then I go, oh, and Chad, let me introduce you to Robert over here, the pastor. And I'm like, he's a pastor. He does great work with church planning and reaching people with the gospel. And it was funny because I knew that in doing that, it would totally take on a completely different vibe. Like that's the problem with Facebook. You can say whatever you want. Yeah. No one knows you. So you can, I mean, I do it all the time. I'm totally guilty of this. Right. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, the Navy SEAL is like, look, I'm sorry, I was a little snarky, but C.S. Lewis says it better than me. And he quotes, gives a link to Mere Christianity where you can read one of the chapters and speaks to the very issue of violence, murder, being a soldier, protection, all of that. I mean, C.S. Lewis speaks to it. Yeah. And then the pastor just kind of, all right, I'm done. I'm out of this. Yeah. And it was funny, but just that little bit of humanity. Let me tell you who each other is. Right. Yeah, and it helps. And now let's debate this.
It really does help, man. It immediately takes it from this is somebody else out there to this is an educated person. This is a kind person. This is a person who maybe knows more than me. I thought that was really good, by the way. It was cool.
I just thought it was hilarious. I'm like, let me tell you who you're talking to.
Yeah, man.
He is educated and he's a Navy SEAL, just you don't get to drop that into very many conversations, but when you do, it's like, hey,
So you don't find many guys like that.
I know, especially that are like as Christian as he is. Like he literally had a huge impact on my life.
That's awesome, man. And praise the Lord for that.
I know. What's funny is, so he had served as active duty, and then he went to Biola University on the GI Bill. So about 6 or 7 of us lived in a house together. We all rented a house. 3 of us had our own single rooms. He had a single room. I had a single room. And one of the other guys had a single room. I don't remember who it was. And then 3 guys, so it must have been 6 of us. And 3 guys shared one room, right? So some of us were like, no, I want my own room. And then 3 guys had to stay in their own room. So when he came to Biola, he would tell us all these great stories. And at one point he goes, well, we haven't been at war since I was on active duty. So everything I did was a training exercise. And like the way he would say it, you were just like, what does this mean exactly? What does this mean? That's awesome. And I don't know this for sure, but I know he became what they call a Mustang. So he was enlisted when he was in. And then after he got his college degree, he went back and was a lieutenant. And I think he went back to active duty, but he never told anyone that. I've just pieced together enough stuff that I'm like, I'm pretty sure he went to active duty because then we were at war. I mean, longest war we've had to date. So, I mean, it was just, anyway, that's my little story on him. And, hey, you know a Navy SEAL, you're like, hey, look, I know one of those guys. Look.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, I like his theological response. He's addressing some issues related to the law of God that people, we've been so influenced. I don't want to go too much down a theological train, but I think this would matter even for our non-Christian listeners. Dispensationalism has so radically affected American
You can't
evangelicalism.
say a word like dispensationalism and not explain what that word means.
Yeah, well, it's essentially this view that the Bible is broken up into different ways that God deals with people over time. And it's kind of made up. Like, there's some good, faithful Christians that are dispensationalists. Most of us have been influenced by that. But they tend to put a really strong distinction between Old Testament and New Testament. They're like, oh, that's the Old Testament, like it doesn't matter, right? Whereas Jesus is like he said, like, I came to fulfill the law, not abolish it, right? So a lot of times your covenant theologians, especially what we call theonomists, will say, well, I'm not saved by working for the law, but it is still how we see God's morality, and it's still how he's communicated his justice. So if God says that we should have the death penalty for rape, then we should probably have the death penalty for rape. And if it also says that you shouldn't commit adultery, well, you shouldn't commit adultery. Like, it's pretty basic, but they recommend maybe some Greg Bonson on some of that, but it sounds like your Navy SEAL buddy is at least on the right track on that. But a lot of Christians
very well studied. I mean, like, he's not a guy I would want to debate on anything theological, because I know he knows his stuff.
Yeah, man.
Like, he's a reader by nature. He's just like you pastors who always read. I mean, he's the exact same way.
Man, we should get this guy on the podcast sometime.
I don't think he would come on.
He wouldn't. Yeah.
There's a reason why there are literally no pictures of him on social media.
Yeah.
I interviewed him for one of my books that I did, and he's like, in no way can you attribute any of this to me.
Oh, man.
All I could leave it was this vague, I talked to this guy who was a Navy SEAL, and here's what he said.
That means that homeboy stacked some bodies. Because the wannabes... I can tell you
right now, he is not in the U.S. He's an expat Pat right now doing what he does.
Yeah. So the guys who are wannabes, they talk all the time. The guys who freaking stacked bodies, they don't want to talk about it. Or if they do, it's the most shaded, quiet, don't ever mention me. Don't ever, whatever. Yeah. That
I don't know. You see, he's so security minded. That's part of the reason why he doesn't want his image online. Like, if you looked at his profile picture, it's like the caricature that you get from Facebook, that Facebook did for you.
Yeah.
Everyone he's ever done. In fact, I was joking with him one time. I go, I think you had a little bit more hair in the caricature than you do in real life. And he's like, hey, the next one's bald. So that's what we get. That's the one that, so.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Crazy stuff, man. Well, do you want to jump to our topic for today?
Let's do it.
So, I think it's worth bringing this article up. I always like when we can anchor this to the actual thing. So CNN put out an article. It was updated on June 4 at 4:38 p.m. So it says gun-toting members of the Boogaloo movement are showing up at protests. And they go on to say, blah, 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 I want to overthrow the government, blah, blah, blah. They call us Boogaloos, as opposed to Mujahideen or Boogalorians or anything we actually call ourselves. He goes on to talk about various...
You mean like
whatever
Leroy calls himself?
Like Leroy calls himself. Yes, not us. Sorry about that. And they go on to, of course, gun-toting, which is meant to be a little bit of a slight. They do finally mention Boogaloo Boys. But then they try to do the whole thing where they throw this connection to white supremacists. And I always just want to bring up, man, everybody who I have heard from, every meme page, every Discord server, everything has made explicit communication about that. Like, man, if things go down and we have to, and the Boogs have to defend themselves, first of all, it is only for self-defense. Nobody's trying to go and start a fight. Everybody is saying, let's be careful.
That's not the Boogaloo Boys.
And so the language is, when it goes down, if we have to shoot tyrants to defend ourselves and our family, says Boogaloos, as the CNN calls us, the language is like, well, the second people that get strung up is going to be the pedophiles, and the third group is going to be the racists. Like, they're very clearly anti-racist to an extreme degree, right? And so it kills me every time. And every time there's been a mention of anything pro-gun or anything else, CNN and every leftist, liberal, whatever, tries to attach it to a white supremacist movement. When the Boogaloo movement is the exact opposite. All the pro-gun guys, exact opposite. You are hard-pressed to find anybody racist that's any way connected to that movement. And when you do, it's probably going to be an FBI shill, right? And so I am so furious that, like, this is just plain propaganda that's been brought out. And because it's just false. Like, none of the guys they talk to have any association with anything racist at all. And so, first of all, I'm mad about this stuff because CNN is just straight lying about a movement that is peaceful and a movement that is there to protect the rights and liberty of everyone, regardless of who they are. But there's something interesting coming out of this. I'm going to set this up, and then I want you to say some things about it, if you don't mind, Pete. I am following some without going into detail, we're following some Discords. If you're not on Discord, I do recommend Discord, and there are some freedom groups that have servers on there that you can follow. Highly, highly recommend jumping on there. But the reporting that's going on where people are like, hey, these guys in the Hawaiian shirts are protecting both businesses and protesters. If necessary, they're literally standing the gap between protesters and police. Some of them are taking rubber bullets to the face. Sorry, my son just went in. Taking rubber bullets to the face. They're wearing their gas masks. They're kicking back CS gas cans to defend, Black Lives Matter protesters. That's the opposite of racism, man.
Right.
And so CNN should take a hard look at themselves and realize what they are doing is actually creating violence. They're actually creating horrible problems. And we've got good guys out there literally risking their life and limb and well-being to protect protesters and to protect stores. I think that's another important thing. They're like, we're standing out there saying we're against both the riots and the police. And here we are caught in the middle. And now we're starting to see Black Lives Matter Instagram pages are posting videos saying these guys in the Hawaiian shirts are out here protecting us. And so we're starting to see more and more of that. A lot of the guys in the Black Lives Matter movement, which I'm not associated with at all, but I know some people in it, and they're saying, like, man, these redneck boys with AR-15s wearing Hawaiian shirts are coming out helping us, and it means a lot. And so, yeah, anyway, that was my false CNN narrative message.
Well,
today.
I think part of the reason why they're doing all this is it comes back to the gun control goal that they have. And by gun control, they have the guns, you don't. I mean, no one is advocating that we get rid of guns. They're saying you can't have guns. Exactly. We want to have all the guns, meaning us, the police, which now they want to defund all the police. It's like, I don't understand. This literally is making no sense whatsoever.
Yeah. We got to talk about that in a second, by the way. Go ahead.
Yeah. So what I thought was interesting too, this happened. I don't know if you heard about this because it's a local thing. So I don't know if it made it around the country. The Orange County Sheriff's Department. So I live in Orange County. They were out, during all the riots and the protests. And I don't know if at this moment when this happened, the Sheriff's Department was trying to stop the riots or just, making sure the protests didn't get out of hand. I don't know.
Yeah.
And this one particular sheriff deputy is now on administrative leave. I don't know why he did this. And I also don't understand how he can do this as a sheriff himself, as a sheriff deputy. But he had patches on his bulletproof vests. He had the 3%er patch, and he had the don't tread on me patch. And I'm like, seriously, man, how are you a 3%er and a don't tread on me and you're with the sheriff's department? Like, are you conflicted inside? I don't understand. I don't get this. So he's in all kinds of trouble because, they're basically going, oh, that's part of a militia movement, the 3%ers. And it's like, are you kidding me? It's a stupid patch. There's no 3% group out there going, oh yeah, no, seriously, I'm a card carrying 3%er. It's just a patch, man.
Yeah.
It's a patch.
Just a patch. And
And don't tread on me is like our national motto from back in the day. Seriously, man.
Yeah. Oh, there's so much going on with that, man. First of all, the fact that they're infringing on his rights, but second, that he doesn't seem to quite get how this works. If you're flying,
he's the one who's infringing on people's rights.
I know. This is always the funniest thing to me when people are flying a thin blue line flag and a "Don't tread on me" flag, and I'm like, I don't think you get it, man. Like, and I think that's part of kind of the.
Have you seen the Hawaiian blue line? It's not a blue line; it's a Hawaiian print line.
Oh, yes, I have. Oh. Well, you know that there are police departments that have put out. I mean, that's the Big Igloo patch, right? There's a flag and everything. I mean, there are police departments that are putting out warnings, essentially saying, this is the flag of the Boogaloo movement, and they want to kill cops and blah, 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 and really pushing a really scary negative, essentially calling Boog Boys terrorists, which puts you in a terrible situation if your plan is to stand peacefully between cops and protesters.
Right. And
those cops think that you are there only to incite violence. And this is why I hate all those lies. Because that's what's gonna cause violence. But yeah, I know about that patch a little bit. Leroy might have one or two. I don't know.
Okay.
One or two. But no, I think just the fact that this guy with his 3%er patch just doesn't get it. And then he's being persecuted for it, which, yeah.
Well, I mean, the problem is people don't actually understand what that stuff stands for.
No.
I mean, because realistically, wearing the 3% and the "Don't tread on me," it's kind of like, so what? I mean, It doesn't mean anything. He's not part of some militia. That's crap.
Well, if he was, isn't that what the Second Amendment was written for?
Because we didn't have a national army back then.
Yeah.
And, but the fact that he did it and he's a sheriff deputy, I'm like, what, dude? What? Like, I don't think you get it. I don't think you get it.
Yeah. Oh, that's killing me, man. So this kind of brings up an interesting thing, though. I think that there's a lot of guys out there that would say they're pro-gun, they're pro-whatever. They would say they're with us, but they're also flying their thin blue line patch or flags. And they don't quite get how this works. And they're still not ready to flip that switch and acknowledge that, like, man, the police are enforcing unconstitutional laws. And they just haven't quite figured out that, like, hey, being a good American citizen doesn't mean you have to obey or like everything the cops are doing. And anyway,
what did you think about that statement that those healthcare professionals put out that Tucker Carlson just murdered? Basically saying, we don't believe that the protests are in any way going to endanger people with COVID-19. However, we don't agree to that if we're talking about protesting the stay-at-home orders. Yeah. Then we think that's totally dangerous. You shouldn't be doing it.
That is literally doublespeak.
Completely.
That is 1984 style doublespeak. How in the heck are we going to believe that that the purpose of the protest determines whether or not I get COVID-19? That is the biggest load of crap.
Right.
It should tell everybody that there is a false narrative going on about this. Now, I'm not saying that the virus isn't real. I'm not saying it's not dangerous, but clearly there is a false narrative going on. And when they can, in one statement, contradict themselves scientifically, that's when you know this is not about science. It's not about the virus. It's about anything else.
I think the reason why they said what they said, and all of our health officials here in California, where we've had so many of the protests, our politicians, I believe that the reason why they're saying this is because they are completely outnumbered in the George Floyd protests. Whereas there were a lot of people protesting the stay-at-home orders, but there was not thousands upon thousands blocking traffic, walking the streets, shutting down the cities, needing a curfew to be put in place. I mean, that didn't happen with the stay-at-home protesters because there wasn't enough of them. They fear the people. This is why they don't want the people armed. One of our mutual friends, a black man, sent me a video on Facebook of basically this guy's a black man's point of view on what we need to do to get racial equality. And like point number 2 was you need to take advantage of your Second Amendment rights. And he's like, we've got to arm ourselves legally as the black community. And my buddy, our buddy, you know who he is. Mm-hmm. He sent me a picture on Voxer, and he goes, "Hey, I had to pick these up," and he picked up an M&P and a 1911. He's like, I need to protect my family. I'm like, yeah, you do.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
Especially you. I mean,
yeah.
I have a pretty good idea of where he lives, and I'm betting the cops don't come down there unless absolutely have to.
Oh, that reminds me of another situation where the cops didn't help me out, by the way. I've literally been in a part of Cleveland. I wasn't even that far off of like the main drag. We were doing ministry, and what looks to be a pimp is shaking down for cash what looks to be a hooker. And he's got 2 or 3 buddies, more than I could even slow down if I'd ran up and tried to help. And I'm texting somebody that I know that lives around there. I'm like, hey, can you get over here and just be some backup for me? And he's like, hey, I'm calling the police right now. But he's like, you should know they're afraid to go down that street. They're probably not going to show up. And I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, they're even like, I'm watching a crime, an assault on a woman. And maybe she's making bad decisions with her life, but like, so is he. And like, you're not going to show up? That's what I cannot think of a time when I needed the cops urgently and they showed up. I got 4 instances of times when either they showed up or it was after it was too late.
Yeah, so they still haven't opened up any of the parks around where I live for the kids. And I'm willing to bet the cops would come and protect the parks and make sure that they're closed down.
I would not be surprised.
Around me. I'm willing to bet that they would do that.
Well, we've got situations where the cops would show up in certain places to arrest you if you tried to open your business, but will not show up to stop rioters from destroying your business.
Yeah. Well, that was pretty obvious. All LA, Long Beach. Yeah, that happens so much here.
And talk about feeling like we don't need the police. That'll make you feel like you don't need the police. If the only time they come is to arrest you for trying to feed your family, but they won't come to protect your business that you use to feed your family, that's when it's like, screw this. We don't need them.
Right.
We just don't. I think about like how much it costs in property taxes. Man, you could be hiring private security. You could be paying somebody who's you could have a subscription service where like they're within a certain amount of space and they get there fast. Like there's so many other ways. The free market could handle security so much better than the government does. I need to be careful.
It's unfortunate, man. It's unfortunate. Yeah. I'm torn with the whole. I mean, the police serve a vital role. There's no doubt they serve a vital role when they show up. I mean, they got to actually show up, but they do. They serve a vital role. And I think totally getting rid of a police department is insane. It's insanity to me. I'm just saying, I think it's crazy.
I get why. I mean, just abolishing it right out, like I get it. I actually think that if we had a security force, you can call them police, whose job it was to only deal with violent crime, and then you had another group whose job it was to follow up with nonviolent in a completely different way. And we had no speeding tickets, no drug enforcement, no anything like that. I might be on board with that. So I could get down with that because we want to have people that are doing some kind of security. If you want to call them police, I'm good with that. I'm just real nervous about how that is enforced right now. It just seems to go to all the wrong things.
Part of the danger in that is, that's kind of what the mob does in certain communities.
Yeah.
So, it is, you got to pay us to make sure that nothing bad happens to you. And that's not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah, that's exactly what cops do. If I don't pay my taxes, they come and arrest me.
But
and
they still
say
protect your business. Like they don't know who actually paid up or not, right? So if someone breaks into your business, they got to show up, do their little 2-step. I'm just saying, I get both sides. I get it.
I get it. Yeah, I get it, man. I get it.
At some point, though, to me, what the government's job is to protect our rights, like you said before.
Yeah.
There are some things I think absolutely need to be the government's domain, and some things absolutely need to not be the government's domain. So a good example of this,
I agree on that, by the way. Yeah,
is in California, we recently shut down one or maybe more of our privately run prisons. I am completely against privately run prisons. To me, that is literally the government's job. Because now when all of a sudden it's about making money, it's about, okay, well, the less we give to our prisoners, the less we provide to them, the more money we make. That's a problem. That's a huge problem. You can't treat people, even felons, as if they're trash. You wonder why they keep, in a life of crime. What the heck, man? We just keep doing that to people? That doesn't make any sense to me. So I was glad when they closed down, at least I know they closed down one, and I think Gavin's trying to get rid of all of them, which I actually don't have a problem with. To me, that's a government's job right there. Your job is to protect the people in that capacity. Someone has to go away for a certain amount of length of time. That's your job. You do that. I'm totally cool with that. Because now it's not about making money, right? Because the prisons don't make money the less they provide to the prisoners. It could mean that, there's still, believe me, there's 101 ways that they make money off of the prison. I know this because a good friend of mine just spent the last couple of years up in a federal prison camp up in Oregon. And he told me halfway through it, he's like, look, let me tell you how corrupt this place is. He goes, the food that we eat, the chicken, it actually gets delivered to the prison, and it says, and I quote, not for human consumption. That's what they buy the prisoners. Yeah. Any of the good meat that comes in there, the guards take.
Of course it does. Yeah.
Because, so I mean, there's plenty of ways that they are doing criminal stuff in prison and they're making money off of it, whether they're turning around and selling it or just enjoying it for themselves. I mean,
or using slave labor, as has been the case in a lot of things, where people are making clothes for businesses, and at $1.50, $2 an hour, $2.50 an hour, and you can't get that kind of labor anywhere but China.
It's not even, you don't even get paid that much. Some of the guys' jobs are like 20 cents an hour is what they get paid.
Isn't that crazy, man?
I mean, some of the guys, because my buddy, his job that he got paid for was to do payroll for all the inmates. So, I mean, $5 a month was not uncommon. That's what you earn.
That's terrible.
And literally everything costs you money. You need toothpaste? I hope you got someone on the outside that's going to provide you some money. You want actual food, like real food you're going to buy from the commissary? I hope you got somebody on the outside who's going to give you some money. I mean, it's criminal. Like our criminal system, our criminal justice system is nothing to do with justice.
I know.
It's crooked. But to me, that's like one of their jobs. Now they need to do it right. And I don't want private industry getting into that, because then I think it takes on a whole nother twist that I don't agree with.
I can get on board with that. I still lean towards if there's almost always a free market solution, but I'm with you. As theologically, I would say there's a realm for the church's authority, a realm for the authority of the home, and a realm for the government's authority. And if everybody stays in their lane, we do all right. The problem is the government has been way outside of their lane and then not actually doing their job.
Yeah.
Like the fact that, I don't know if anybody has seen the documentary about Jeffrey Epstein on Netflix, just came out a few days ago.
Dude, I could only watch like 1 or 2 episodes. I don't remember how many I watched, because it says at the beginning, some viewers might find this disturbing. I'm like, might?
Yeah.
How were you not deeply disturbed to your core to see what this guy did to these children?
This is what really pisses me off about all of this. That it was a known. We're talking about hundreds of eyewitnesses, right? And then they not only we knew it was all proven. He got convicted of sex with minors, right? And they didn't even follow up on his parole. Acosta gives him this sweetheart deal. We all knew about it. And then there's all these other people implicated. They didn't do jack to follow up with them. And I still come back to you had everybody. If you can't protect children, you are not doing your job, and you don't deserve to have it. In fact, I'm to the point where these are people that are protecting the most wicked. They're culpable with them. And I still believe in the death penalty for that kind of stuff. Like, you rape a child, and by the way, a child can't give consent. So if you had sex with a child, you're a rapist. And I totally believe in the death penalty for that. And I believe that all these, DAs and whatever that were involved, they deserve it too. And I know that that's controversial, but
what's interesting is I've had a change of heart over the years on the death penalty.
Me too, man.
But I think mine's the other way.
You went the other way? I was one way. I went the other way. I came back. Yeah.
So here's the thing for me. Growing up, always believed in the death penalty. It helps people to realize there are consequences for your actions. Now I'm really bothered by it, like a lot. Like the last, 5-10 years when I've thought about it, I absolutely believe, 100% believe, there are certain crimes the death penalty is warranted.
Yeah, I agree.
The problem is, for me, it's a permanent solution, and time again, we see people weren't guilty.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
There's so much corruption with our politicians and our prosecutors that it bothers me. So like, for instance, right now the Just Mercy movie is free on every major platform. Definitely, guys, I encourage you to go watch that. It's a great movie.
Yeah.
Really, really disturbing movie, because you see just how crooked the politicians were, and the prosecutors were, and the sheriff was in this one particular town where the guy was sentenced to death. And at the end, it gave a really interesting stat. So how they do a little thing at the end and about the characters in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it said 1 out of every 9 people convicted or on death row has been proven to not be guilty. 1 out of 9. I'm like, okay, first of all, that is freaking high.
It is high.
And those people were going to die. I got a problem with the death penalty. Only not that I don't think it's not deserved, but I don't trust our justice system to be just.
Yeah. So that gets
to me, that's where the problem is.
But I'm with you. And that gets me back to the original thing. It's kind of like, this is their job. They need to do their job right. They're not doing their job right. So I'm down with, like, let's abolish everything. And if we do anything, let's set it up in the just way. Like, Scripture talks about how, like, if somebody's going to be convicted, you got to have multiple witnesses. There's got to be evidence. There's a whole method in it. And we're not living by that at all. It's just nuts.
Yeah.
And so I'm with you. It would have to be done right. And right now, I don't trust our current government to be able to handle it. I would say that. And
that's my biggest issue.
I'm with you on that.
That's my biggest issue is I just don't trust.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the immunity that our prosecutors have now, basically since the 1960s, when the Supreme Court said, they have prosecutorial immunity.
That's bullcrap.
It has led to my buddies who just spent the 2 years at Camp Fed, as we like to call it.
Yeah.
I read everything that came out because I knew the company. So he was a director of operations. He didn't own the company. He was just an employee. He ends up going to jail for 2 years. He's on parole right now because it'll last like another 3 years on parole, all that type of stuff. I read every single thing that the prosecution said because it's all available, right? It's all online. Mm-hmm. And I saw they lied. They bold-faced lied to the judge.
Mm-hmm.
They could. They can get away with it. And I knew they lied because I had worked at that company. I knew they were lying. I'm like, this is all lies.
Yeah.
Nothing can happen to them for lying to the judge.
Yeah. You have prosecutorial immunity. You have the fact that they're allowed to lie in that. You have qualified immunity for cops. And then we know they're allowed to lie. So think about how stacked it is. If you get caught lying on the stand, the punishment for perjury is actually really serious. So think about how the game is stacked against the citizen. That's not just. It's just not. Everybody should, by the way, if you haven't looked into qualified immunity, look into it. It's shady as crap.
Yeah.
And then people will defend it like crazy. The bootlickers, when you're like, hey, maybe we should, hold cops responsible. And they're like, oh, now people will be able to get away with all kinds of things. I'm like, how about we just not allow cops to lie and get away with it?
Yeah.
And Yeah, crazy time. So I'm with you on principle. I still come back to like, I think there's a way this ought to be done. And I'll be honest.
I don't know how to do it. At least not in our current system, and I don't even know what that system would look like to where you could do it properly.
Yeah. Oh, well, for me, ultimately, it came down to and I'm with you. I feel the same way. I don't know yet how it would be fully. I've got some ideas, but right now, where it's too much of a mess in America. But I have had too many times where I'm talking to somebody who they were violated repeatedly by someone who was already a known sex offender.
Yeah.
And I'm like, we keep having this, right? And I'm still like, why is the guy who sold weed stuck in jail, but the pedophile lives, 2 houses down? Why is that? So at the very least, let's lock him up forever. But they're not doing that either. They're letting these guys out. And I'm like, you know what? I'm thinking about how a life is destroyed every time one of those guys perpetrates. So I'm like, if we can kill him the first time, give him the death penalty, and essentially save the lives of about 5 or 6 that he would have, abused in the next whatever, that's where I'm like, yeah, I'm all for the death penalty. And for some biblical reasons. But I also recognize, I'm with you 100%, that it's so misapplied, and I don't trust our current government to implement it. I'm with you on that.
I mean, think about how many black people they would say over the years, oh, they raped someone, let's just go kill them.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was how lynching was. That was what lynching basically was.
Right, exactly. And so that, again, to me, it's like, I got a real problem with how do we know for sure that this stuff actually, happened? How can we for sure do something as final as taking someone's life?
Yeah.
When, we see the stats, and it's a staggering amount.
Oh, yeah.
If you guys watch the Just Mercy movie, you're like, these guys are crooked. These guys were crooked, period. And it was so blatant, so finally just in their face, that the prosecutors basically said, we're not going to fight against their desire to dismiss the case. We're going to go along with it. Because it was so blatant, so in their face. But again, and I'm thinking, this was 1993. I was graduating high school in 1993. And I'm like, dude, this is like not that long ago. It's the South. Yeah.
Well, and about George Stinney Jr. It's like 70 years ago. It was this 14-year-old kid that got, he was, railroaded through. They executed him, and it's 70 years later, he gets exonerated. For crying out loud, the murder weapon was too heavy for him to have been able to lift.
Right. Let alone swing and hit the girls that killed him.
And so that means whoever killed those kids
got away with it.
Never got caught, right? Which, by the way, probably means it was somebody in power in that town that had to pin it on somebody fast so it wouldn't come back to them.
So let's put it on the poor little black kid.
I would immediately look into like whatever cop was there or whatever town leader, somebody prominent that had like. But yeah, it's a mess. And so just notice how like this is a bummer. We're coming down at the end of this. And we're like, oh, screw this, right? This is where I will keep coming back. I keep having this conversation. I'm like, my only hope is Christ, because people are wicked. We will not get justice in this world. But man, Jesus saves. I have seen him turn murderers into loving friends. And I also know he punishes evil. So either that wicked thing that will not go unanswered. Either Christ paid for it on the cross because the perpetrator was part of the redeemed and it was still paid for, or that person's not one of the redeemed and he will burn in hell forever. And man, I'll be honest, both of those things give me comfort. And so the only hope is Christ, man. Put your hope in Christ.
Well, it's funny. We talked about, there's another movie on Netflix right now called American Gospel, which you would say, hey, you should watch that. So I watched it last week, I think it was, and there was a great point in that movie that I'd never thought about it like this, because the question that so many non-Christians rightfully ask, because I totally get where they're coming from, is why do bad things happen to good people? Why do they get cancer, lose their house to a fire, have their business looted and destroyed, burned up? I mean, why do good things or bad things happen to good people? And I thought it was really interesting because I'd never thought about it like this. And they go, well, let's look at the reverse of that. why do good things happen to bad people? And I'm like, ooh, man, yeah. There are a lot of bad people. Good things happen to them. I can think of pretty much every politician I've ever thought about as being, hey, they've had good things happen to them and they are bad people. Yeah. And I'm like, ooh, yeah.
Or I would even maintain there's no such thing as good people. Like, like we're all sinners in need of a savior, and we are all rebellion. I think that's where you got to come to.
God. You got to realize that point, but it almost starts with, well, before I could admit that I'm a bad person in need of a savior, I got to actually look at this and go, wait a second, why do good things happen to bad people? Wait a second, maybe there are no good people.
Yeah, man. Yeah. That's a great documentary, by the way.
Yeah,
love that one.
Was.
Yeah, it was good. So some good ones to recommend. Yeah, if your stomach can handle it, the Epstein thing is worth watching. It eases up a lot in the second episode because it gets more into how he was prosecuted and all the corruption around that. That makes it a little less painful to watch, although it's painful in a different way. That one, it's interesting. Of course, American Gospel definitely recommended, and yeah, man, good things happen. We got a lot of great stuff on Netflix right now.
Well, they kind of had to. There's nothing else to do.
Yeah.
In states like mine that are still on lockdown.
You can only watch Tiger King so many times.
Dude, man, I'm telling you. Oh, dude, there was a great meme. I think I sent it to you. Because I remember thinking this is one of those memes I can't post on Facebook. And so you got to private message those ones to certain people. Yeah. But it was like, how do I say this? You can imagine what word they used. Stick it to the police and stick it to Carol Baskin. I was dying when I saw that one.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, that fits.
In the quarantine, the memes are getting spicy, man. They keep getting better. The pro-life, I'm following like a pro-life meme page that's usually run by Christians. And it was a Wheel of Fortune, whatever. And it said, and it was by the pro-life, as far as I know, this is a Christian meme page, and it says, Planned Parenthood, go, and then it's F space K yourself.
Oh
and
my gosh.
I'm like, who, and it's probably not National Right to Life, but I'm like, who did this? And I think it's awesome. But
so funny.
They're getting spicy, man. It's good stuff.
What about that article that came out? It was on the WashingtonTimes.com, so I don't know if it's true or not, because that's not exactly the most reputable of sites. Yeah. But some racetrack was told by the state you can only have 25 people come, and they go, well, we're going to call it a protest against inequality and racism. And they had 2,000 people show up at the race. I was like, that's brilliant. I don't know if this is real or not, but that's brilliant. Just call it a protest.
Yeah, that's the joke. Babylon B was talking about. Churches are getting around the stay-at-home order by just calling it a riot.
Yeah, we're just protesting over here, so we get to avoid all that.
Oh, that's awesome, man.
Yeah,
it's good stuff, dude. Well, man, this has been great. I'm excited. I'll give our plug, and then I got to jump off because my battery is dying.
Do it.
Hey, everybody. As always, got to give you the plug for Lake Erie Arms. I'm going to tell you right now, concealed carry classes you can sign up online for. And we're filling them up like crazy because everybody who bought their guns a few weeks ago wants to do concealed carry classes right now. So go to learms.net, go ahead and schedule up. We're going to start scheduling out a few more months. And, of course, come in and get yourself a gun or some AR parts and get ready for whatever's coming. All right?
All right, guys. Thanks so much. We'll be back next week with another great episode. Talk to you then.
You've been listening to the From Concealment Podcast with Pete Mitchell and Dan Sams. Be sure to tune in next week for more gun talk. Also, check out the From Concealment website for more shooting-related goodness at FromConcealment.com.